and learn. Okay, fabulous. So in that case, I'm Jason, but don't worry about me. You won't have to deal with me much longer, right? But it's my pleasure. Oh, the Zoom background is not being friendly to it. Here we go. It's my pleasure, along with SABR Chicago and Stay Home with SABR, to welcome author and SABR member DB Firstman, right? Just off their brand new book, Hall of Name. As you can tell, I've got an actual copy here. Read it and even reviewed it for the SABR Baseball Cards blog a little bit ago. And but now let's turn it to the star of the show. I prepared some questions in advance, and let's just take it from there. So DB, for folks not familiar with the book yet, right? How would you describe it, or what's kind of the pitch for folks that are wondering, what's this book about?
The book is a hybrid of a reference book and a humor book. I have profiled 100 of the most memorable names in baseball history, not necessarily the best players, not necessarily nicknames. I'm talking about the best names, the most memorable names in baseball history. And I give an etymology of their name, how they got their name, because this isn't a book that's just going to point at a name and say, ha ha, that's a funny name. I want to give some heft and weight to the book itself and come up with the derivation of their name, how they got it, whether it was their parents or their ethnicity or their nationality. I give a profile, I give the biography of their baseball career. I give ephemera about their life before and after baseball. And it's really a book that I think is a cross between reference and humor. It's supposed to educate, but it's also supposed to make you smile and learn a few new things along the way about people you may not have heard about. We're not talking about the Mickey Mantles of the world. We're more talking about the Mickey Morandinis of the world.
Well done. So let me take you way back now, or I shouldn't say way back, but certainly well before the book was even an idea. The background's killing me. When did you become a baseball fan, and what inspired you to become a baseball fan?
My parents were divorced when I was 2. I lived with my mother. My father had visitation rights, would come over on the weekends, plop himself on the couch, turn on the TV, and turn on the Yankee games. And I quickly realized that if I wanted to relate to my father, it was going to be through baseball. And one of his favorite things to do was to take me out to Yankee Stadium, which I thought was kind of odd considering I lived only 10 minutes away from Shea Stadium. And I was like, Dad, why can't we go watch the Mets? And he looked at me like I had 3 heads. He was a diehard Yankee fan, and so I grew up with baseball in my blood through my father. He passed away in 1994, but I've loved baseball for all sorts of reasons, from its statistics to its history to its the athletics involved in it. Just everything about baseball itself has given me some form of happiness.
Right.
Okay. Yeah, I think probably a lot of folks on this call can relate. Let me ask you, what prompted you to write the book? Was there a particular player whose name or whose story inspired you?
Well, I have a blog, Value Over Replacement Grit. And one of my favorite things to do is I'm big into reference books like encyclopedias and thesauruses and dictionaries and things like that. And I'm always curious, and I'm always leafing through various reference books. And whether it's words or spoonerisms or puns or plays on words, I've always been fascinated and inquisitive about etymologies of names and words and things of that nature. And I wanted to know where these players got their names from. So I was doing some research, and I said, maybe some other people might be interested in this. So I started writing about these players on my blog. And the first one I think I wrote about was Billy Joe Robideau, who came from Massachusetts, of all places, with a name like Robideau. But, you know, he was one of the first people I wrote about. And then my favorite player of my early writing on the blog was Bristol Robotham Lord, whose nickname is the Human Eyeball. So just researching about how he got his name, how he got his nickname, you know, that sort of gave me a jolt of adrenaline to keep researching and keep writing. And I thought maybe I should make a book out of all of these players I'm writing about. And back in 2012, I approached a couple of publishers like, you know, McFarland and Skyhorse and people like that. And they said, personally, we'd love the topic. We just don't think it's going to sell. So I tabled that idea until about a year and a half ago. And then the self-publishing world opened up. And I said, I'm going to go for it. I'm going to self-publish this book on my own. And so I started writing it and researching it. And here we are.
Yeah, fantastic. I learned something important about Brislord because in Jewish culture, I'll say, when you hear the name Brislord, you have kind of it evokes a strange image. I never knew it was short for Bristol, but perfect. Let me ask you this. I couldn't help but put a baseball card question in. So were you, as a kid then, were you trading away cards of Joe Morgan and Tom Seaver for Biff Pocoroba and Bill Maharodny? Were you kind of chasing the funny names at the expense of the Hall of Fame talent?
I really wasn't that into the odd names at that point. I was collecting mostly Mets and Yankees. The Yankees had a third baseman back in 1972 named Celerino Sanchez, who didn't hit very well, didn't field very well, lasted about a half a season, and then was replaced when they traded for Greg Nettles. So if you've got Greg Nettles coming in, your career is basically over. I wasn't really collecting odd names as much as I was just collecting baseball cards of players I liked. So at that point.
All right. But how about now? Could I trade you a Pocoroba for a Joe Morgan?
No. Well, I already have a Pocoroba, so you're going to have to come up with somebody else.
All right.
When I was researching the book, I was collecting the oddball names. Yes.
I remember that. I remember you would post to the Saber Baseball Cards Facebook group, and you would buy the players with the very funny names, and yes. I didn't know you had the book coming yet, but it all made sense at the end.
Yes.
So I know we have a national or even international audience here, but since this is Chicago Saber, maybe highlight a few of the Chicago area players featured in the book.
Well, first let's start with Orville Overall. Orville Overall is a pitcher from 1906 to 1910, also pitched in 1913. His nickname was Big Groundhog because for his time, he was rather large. He pitched in the 1910s, and he was 6'2", 214. And he was also named Big Groundhog because he was born on February 2nd, Groundhog Day. So that's Orville Overall. We also have Pete Lecoq, the famous Pete Lecoq, the son of Hollywood Squares host Peter Marshall.
Is that true?
That is true.
Wow.
Yep. Yes. Pete Lecoq's claim to fame may be that he perhaps precipitated the retirement of Bob Gibson, because in what turned out to be Bob Gibson's final game, Pete Lecoq hit a grand slam home run off of Gibson, and that after the game was over, Gibson said, you know, when Pete Lecoq hits a grand slam home run off of you, it's probably time to retire. So there's Pete Lecoq. And of course, we have Milton Bradley, who was a Cub for a year. He signed a 3-year contract with the Cubs, but only lasted a year because he basically cursed out the Cubs management late in September, saying this is, you know, they screw everything up. This is why they haven't won in 100 years. And so his name anagrams to boldly intolerable me, which is quite appropriate for him. He outlasted his welcome in many different spots.
I'm glad you brought up Bradley. When I saw his anagram in the book, Boldly Intolerable Me, I thought, wow, you really nailed it, especially for Chicago fans. So one of the features for folks who haven't read the book yet is for every single player, DB has a clever anagram. I'm wondering, DB, did you have other favorites besides the Milton Bradley in terms of the anagrams?
Sure. There was a relief pitcher for the Texas Rangers in the mid-2000s called Warner Madrigal, which is a great name in and of itself, but Warner Madrigal anagrams to the very appropriate marginal reward. He was entirely marginal. John Wesley Glasscock, otherwise known as Jack Glasscock, anagrams to Shagswell enjoys cock.
Oh, now please, I think this is a family episode.
Well,
okay. All right.
Well,
we'll assume roosters. We'll assume roosters. We're talking about.
Right.
Yeah.
And Ugeth Urtain Urbina anagrams to Ugh, urinate, ruin tuba. Ruin tuba. Yep. So those are a few of the anagrams of player names.
That was definitely one of my favorite parts of the book, and I know you're a very good Scrabble player, right? And so I was sort of picturing the rack, you know, of Milton Bradley, and then kind of rearranging it in different ways or something like that. These days, I know computers can help with this.
Yeah, computers definitely help me on that.
Yeah. Okay, this may be a tough one to put you on the spot for, but is it possible to go around the diamond and give us your all-time Hall of Name team?
Well, let's see. Let's catchers. We've got Biff Pokarova, who's in the book.
Yep.
And Bill Naharodny, which is just a fun name to say. First base, you can't go wrong with Pete Lecoq, of course. And Doug Minkiewicz, who caught the ball, even the final out in the 2008 World Series. Is that right? Am I misremembering that? He caught the final out for the Red Sox in the World Series.
Okay.
Second base, Frankie Frisch, Bill Wambsgans, who turned the unassisted triple play in the World Series, and my personal favorite name of recent vintage, Gift Ngope, who became the first player from South Africa to appear in the major leagues. The shortstop, we have Jack Glasscock and Zoilo Versailles. People might remember Zoyo. Third base, another person I profile in the book, Archimedes Pozo, Howard Johnson, Placido Polanco, and Rance Mullinix. And then in the outfield, we have, of course, you have to have Yastrzemski and Kai Kyler, not Kiki, his name is pronounced Kai. You have Milton Bradley, Oddibe McDowell, and Quentin McCracken. And for the pitchers, let's go with Heathcliff Slocum, Paul Ossenmacher. My personal favorite, this guy was a reliever for the Washington Nationals in the late 2000s, Atahualpa Severino, named after an Indian warrior, I believe. J.J. Putz, of course. It's not Putz, it's Putz. Mark Lemangelo. It's not Lemangelo, it's Lemangelo.
That's what he
And
tells people anyway.
yeah. And so those would probably be on my all-star teams.
Not bad, not bad. Yeah, I think weren't there a couple of years maybe, I think Biff Pocoroba, Bill Naharodny, and I think maybe even Wayne Nordhagen were all catchers at the same time or something. It was a good time to have a really long name as a catcher.
Yes.
Okay, I always like to ask this when I meet an author. So for viewers who've thought about writing a book, but maybe haven't done it yet, what advice would you give? Maybe talk about some of the obstacles you faced and how you overcame them.
My particular subject matter ran into some difficulties because I was not writing about one particular subject. I was not writing about one player. I was writing about 100 players. And some of the 100 players had no baseball history to speak of. They had barely a cup of coffee. They were up for a day, a game, a week. And they really didn't have much in the way of a biography to speak of. So I looked for and sought out every biographical reference book I could find. I went to McFarland, I went to University of Nebraska Press, I went through the SABR library, and I found every possible baseball bio book I could find. Then I went through Wikipedia, then I went through newspapers.com, ancestry.com, looking for any details I could find about these players. And when I couldn't find anything on them, I also went to the Baseball Bio Project, which was a total lifesaver for me in terms of finding information out about some of these players. Other obstacles were, it's my first book. I knew nothing about the process of getting a book to print. Half of the battle was writing the book. The other half was getting the book from the manuscript form to the printed form that you have in front of you. Fortunately, I have a friend in the Scrabble community who does layouts, book layouts. So he helped me transform my manuscript into the pretty book that you see right now. And then I went to, yes, and then I found a company that takes the manuscripts and will print them up for you, and you can order from them for distribution on Amazon and other sites. The illustrator I got through, the illustrator of my book cover, I got through Twitter. I basically put the word out on Twitter saying, I'm looking for an illustrator for my book cover. If you're interested and you love baseball, let me know. And I got a ton of responses. I knew what I wanted in terms of a format for the cover. I just had no artistic ability whatsoever in terms of drawing. So I told him what I wanted, and I got the cover that I wanted. And I think it's a really kick-ass cover. I think it really, really pops, and really, if you were seeing it on the bookshelf, you would pick it up. So the real issue is making time to write when you have a full-time job. And so I have a full-time job. I work for the city of New York. And so I'm there from 9 to 5, and I come home, and you really have to be dedicated to setting aside time and putting, and getting your friends to realize that, I love you, I care about you, I want to see you, but I've got this book project that I really, really, really want to focus on. And just being dedicated to that and diligent with it. And having understanding friends who are cheering for you and rooting you on in this process really helps.
Fantastic. So I would never encourage anybody to judge a book by its cover, but you mentioned the cover illustration. Some of you know the artist, Tim Godden, and it really was fantastic. It really pulled me in, and it's fun too. Of course, the crowd you have at what I'll assume is kind of an induction ceremony, right? Are the players featured in the book. So yeah, I really like that. So I've got a couple more questions for you, and then what I'd like to do then, if you're okay with it, is turn it over to the audience in case they have some questions for you as well.
Sure.
Okay, all right. So let me wrap up my list pretty quick. So I think I saw some of this, and I know I even thought some of this in my own head. So when the book came out, right, and people got a chance to see the 100 favorite names that you featured, right, and the subtitle here. By the way, I didn't say it. The subtitle for Hall of Fame: Baseball's Most Magnificent Monikers, from the Only Nolan to Van Lingle Mungo and more, right? When people get the book and they're flipping through, right? Did a lot of people write to you and say, hey, how could you leave out, this one particular player? And I'm curious what some of the names were that people were outraged not to see, or to put it maybe in a more positive way, that people hope to see in the sequel.
I did mention in my introduction to the book that I didn't write about certain people because, for example, Mickey Mantle is a wonderful name. It is a baseball name from start to finish. You think of baseball when you hear the name Mickey Mantle. I couldn't write anything more about Mickey Mantle that hasn't already been said. I couldn't add anything to his story that hasn't already been printed. When the book came out, people asked me, well, where is Dick Pole?
Right.
And I'm like, well, I had to save some people for the second book because I was hoping there would be a second book, and I think there might be, considering the initial reaction to the book. But some of the people I didn't include because they went by a nickname instead of their given name more often than not. For example, Catfish Hunter, great name, but his given name is Jim Catfish Hunter. The same thing with, Babe Ruth. Well, it was George Herman Ruth, which isn't as memorable, but, for example, we had issues with nicknames. We had issues with, we have to save some names for the second book. And then, I may not have had Dick Pole, but I had plenty of others that were, certainly scatological or more towards the adult side of the view of the readership.
Well, here where you're saying, what else is there to write about Mickey Mantle? I was busily trying to anagram because, we could at least use an anagram. I came up with Key Lime Man, but I have a CT left over. So I'm going to have to count on you to send me an anagram for Mickey Mantle later on.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. And then this is important. This is important for viewers who want to pick up a copy, and I know it's available different places. Is there a particular one you want to plug, or do you want to maybe just share with folks a couple different ways to get the book?
Sure. Certainly available. Hall of Name is available on Amazon.com. It's also available on BarnesandNoble.com. I would appreciate if you also thought of going to your local independent bookstore website and ordering from them, because frankly, Amazon and Barnes & Noble are making money every day, and these independent bookstores are struggling to survive, these days. So think about the independent bookstores. And if you happen to follow me on Twitter and you want a signed copy, then get in touch with me on Twitter at Dianagram, DIANAGRAM, and I will hook you up with a signed copy of the book.
And do the bookmarks still come with it, or did those run out?
Those ran out. I will give you a business card.
Okay, good enough. Yeah, good enough. So, and I'll just make a plug. If you already have the book and you read the book and you like the book, if you don't like the book, don't do this. But if you like the book, I have seen DB every now and then requesting that folks go on Amazon and write a review. For me, I got a reviewer copy, so Amazon wouldn't let me do it. It's like, no, only if you bought it from Amazon or something. But so I couldn't do that. But okay, in that case, I've seen some questions or comments come in the chat, so I'm going to start there, and then we'll open it up a little bit more as well. So let's see what I've got. Oh, this is funny from Ryan. He mentioned your dad was practicing social distancing from Mets fans not going to Shea. So, all right.
In those days, both teams were really kind of dreadful. This was the early to mid 1970s. So yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. That was yeah, for the Yankees about their driest spell, really. Okay, and then Ryan also asks, what makes an odd name for you? He proposes any name could be kind of odd, like Bill Hands, for example. So what kind of criteria do you have?
Sure. Well, my book has 4 specific sections, and one section is related to whether it's the book, the name is alliterative, or it has a rhyme scheme to it. It's Boof Bonzer. It's so it could be Scipio Spinks. Those are alliterative names. If the name rhymes, or if the name is, for example, the hands guy, well, yeah, that's memorable just because it's a little bit different and it's a body part. That's why I like Brandon Belt and Orville Overall. They're parts of clothing, So if it makes me think of something other than baseball, that keys into my to my happy points from a fan perspective, from a writer perspective. If it's scatological, sure. Yeah. We have a whole section in the book on scatological names that are just unfortunate, but they're there. And then there are names where you're just like, what were their parents thinking? How did they, for example, Lasting's Millage got his first name because his parents said he was going to be their final child. So, just the story of the guy's name makes him memorable to me. First of all, Lastings, nobody else is named Lastings. And then the story behind the name really kicks it up a notch for me in terms of being memorable.
Perfect. Okay, watch out for this. I know you do appreciate puns, even bad ones. We have here, Milton Bradley was a gamer.
His as I wrote in the book, his life was nothing but trouble.
That's right. I remember that.
Yeah.
Okay, Captain Jack Glasscock, not to be confused with my USC Gamecocks. Lorraine says.
Right.
I think Captain Jack Glasscock may have even made it onto The Simpsons once with the older baseball players. Okay, Ryan is calling out a favorite of his, Jared Saltalamacchia.
Yes, he made the book too.
Yeah, I remember that. And then we've got from Cecilia Tan, Doug Mankiewicz. His main job was to be Nomar's friend, as I recall, from A to Z. Okay. We've got a Biff sighting. I think, yeah, and Biff has the barbecue joint. When I was little in the early 70s, we drove to Florida. We stopped at Braves Stadium on the way, and Biff Poperoga and Dusty Baker were walking through the parking lot. We got our pictures taken with them. So that's awesome, Lorraine. And oh, yes, and DB, I think you alluded to this, but at the moment, if you had to make the call, are you planning to write a sequel?
I have started preliminary initial research into whittling down the 18,000 people who have played baseball down to another 100 most memorable names. So yes, I am planning on a second book, because who knows how long this pandemic will go. I have nothing better to do with my time. But I really, no, seriously, I have really enjoyed the research process and the writing process. And the initial response to the book has been quite positive. So I'm encouraged to go and do this all over again.
Great. Okay, a couple more from Cecilia. Number one, she notes the bio project, SABR biographical project, has been a monumental achievement. And for folks on the call who maybe aren't familiar, it's literally just tremendously researched and highly readable biographies now of over 5,000 players. And when I say players, count coaches, managers, other people associated with the game,
right,
executives,
right.
et cetera. Over 5,000, right? It's just amazing. But Cecilia also notes the layout of the book looks fantastic, DB. It came out lovely.
Thank you, thank you.
And Ryan agrees.
That is the work of a San Francisco-based designer named Chris Patrick Morgan. So props to him.
Perfect. And then Ron, I don't know if Ron is suggesting this to you or maybe suggesting it to others, but we'll throw it to you first. He's sure there's a book out there. Oh, maybe it's already out there. A book out there with theme teams like the All Money team, Dave Cash or Norm Cash, Barry Bonds or Bobby Bonds, the All Presidents team, etc. Like themes around baseball.
I believe there's already a book out there
Okay.
like that, yes.
Okay. Yeah, good tell. I think from the comment, I think that's what he was saying as well. Okay, well, Ryan is, watch out for Ryan. He is chasing you quick on the anagramming. I think in reference to Cecilia Tan from SABR on the call. He has figured out that if you rearrange Tan, you can get ant. Okay.
Wow, okay.
So, Ryan, don't quit your day job. Okay. Cecilia offering that maybe in the sequel, a book or a chapter with just on nicknames.
I thought about nicknames and I was like, there's already a book out there about just baseball nicknames, which is more of an encyclopedia of baseball nicknames. Yeah. And frankly, I'm more interested in the intent of the parent to name the child as opposed to how he might have gotten this weird nickname like Death to Flying Things. Well, right. That's a great nickname, but I want to know how did Scipio Spinks get his name, because he was born Scipio Spinks. It wasn't, that's not a nickname. That was a given name. And I'm all about the given names.
Perfect. Okay. I might put you on the spot with this one. This is from Richard Bergstrom. He says, who is one person you thought should have a nickname, but never really got one?
Wow. Well, my favorite player growing up, and I preface this by saying I grew up watching the Yankees of the early 70s. My favorite player growing up was Bobby Mercer. And he came from Oklahoma City, just like Mickey Mantle did. And so they were calling him the next Mantle. And of course, you can't live up to that. But I always thought he should have a cool nickname related to his Oklahoma background. And then my next favorite player was Gary Carter, but he was the kid. Yeah. I don't know. I don't know who should have a nickname that doesn't have one yet. That's a good question, though.
Maybe for Mercer, kind of like you have the Commerce Comet, you could have the Commercer Comet.
Oh, God.
All right, let's see. We're all getting in on this now. And then Peter Cottrell suggests, seems like Bruce Brown's list of double uniques would be a good source of candidates for Volume 2. And I think the reference is to players who are the only one in MLB history with their first name and with their last name. So 2 unique names.
And I will say, I forgot to mention that earlier in our get-together here. I did consult with Bruce Brown's list, so that is how I got some of the names that I focused on and wrote about. So yes, I'm aware of Bruce's work, and I thank him for it in the book.
Okay, and then I'm glad Karen rewrote the question. At first it said, we were wondering about DB's search ROM, and I thought, I'm not sure what to ask, but no, we were wondering about DB's search for such obscure baseball cards. Will DB continue to search for some more cards for book 1, or begin searching for new players? And what do you do to get these cards?
I have been focusing on the obscure names and also on the T205 cards.
Nice.
Not the T206s, but the T205s, because I actually prefer them aesthetically. I love the gold borders on the cards. I love the artwork on the cards. But for book 2, if I have any money left over, I think I will find the cards out on eBay, and I don't necessarily need the rookie card of Paul Householder. I wrote about Paul Householder. He didn't make the book, but he will be in book 2. So I don't need his rookie card, but any particular card of his, I will buy. But mostly mostly on eBay or at card shows if we ever have another card show somewhere nearby.
Okay, fabulous. And for folks entering questions into the chat, once I get to the bottom of the chat, I'm going to actually turn it over to y'all for live Q&A. So don't be shy. You can do that, but new questions keep coming. So I do want to get to the bottom of the chat just so we don't miss anything that's been entered. So does anyone know, but we'll start with you, DB. Does anyone know if Naharodny translates into anything?
I have my etymology book, but I don't have it readily accessible. I know it's based on something. It's too uncommon to be without an origin story.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm going to go instant anagram to you, right? As a New York baseball fan, this could refer to his bid to buy the Mets. NY A-Rod? Nah.
Oh,
okay.
God.
All right, I won't quit my day job. Let's see. Cecilia notes, Mickey Mantle anagrams to my cat-like, my cat-like man. My cat-like men. My cat-like men. Right. Okay. And
well,
then
it's nice to know about her cats. I've seen her cats on Facebook. They are quite nice.
And then Bill Perch, he's calling out one of the players he featured in the book, Ferris Fain, a nice name. And I learned something about what he did after baseball from your book.
Yes, he got arrested and he served time in jail for growing pot on his property right. at the tender age of 65. And he was doing it basically to make money for himself because he was a poor player. He was a poor man in retirement. So he was really good at it. That's what he told the police. He's really good at it, and that's what he was doing.
And then from Lorraine, and this will be my last out of the chat before we go to live Q&A. Lorraine is letting us know a great name from South Carolina Gamecock fame, a baseball player named Parker Bangs. Parker Bangs.
Parker Bangs. Did he ever make the majors? It doesn't sound like he made the majors. I think I would have remembered him, but I did not include minor leaguers, or else I would have included Sicknorth Loopstock. Nice.
All right, so let me do this, and we'll try to avoid chaos and pandemonium, right? We're okay with pandemic, but not pandemonium. So right. Let's see if anybody wants to come off mute and ask DB a question. Let's try that. But if somebody else starts asking, maybe put yourself back on mute just to avoid too much chaos. Let's see. Andrew, did you have a question?
Nope.
No. Okay, you popped up big on my screen. I was like, okay, all right. Okay, I know I went through a ton of questions already out of the chat. So I'll open it up again. Any folks have any last questions for DB?
Okay.
All right. Okay. Well, DB, I want to thank you again. Not only for writing a terrific book, but also sharing your time with us, taking a lot of questions and giving us a lot more insight into the book. I know I will be anxiously awaiting the second in the series. Notice I didn't want to say sequel. I don't want to cut you off at 2, right? There could be maybe you could go J.K. Rowling on us and 7 or 8 or whatever it is. So, and let me thank everybody else. And the way we usually do these with Stay Home with SABR, unless I really messed something up, there should be a recording available to watch or for friends who couldn't make it. And then my guess is it'll have about 12 minutes of me just trying to work the computer while recording that maybe we'll be able to trim off if we're lucky. But okay, fantastic. So DB, thank you once again. And thank you everybody for joining us.
Thank you. Had a great time.
Okay, terrific.
Thank you, DB.